I did selection, finished selection, my first diving task was up in Scotland, where the SBS was pioneering exit and re-entry from submarines. So that means that while the submarine's under the water, divers inside the submarine goes into a chamber, if you like, a small chamber. The chamber fills up with water, then the hatch is opened and the divers can come out onto the submarine while it's underwater, and basically go to the surface, and then whatever your operation is, get a boat, swim in, get a canoe, swim in, whatever, all your equipment, whatever. And then when you come back, you do the whole thing in reverse. And there was no one in the world doing this. As usual, the SBS was pioneering this, and I just arrived in Scotland, and I was heading to Gairloch to get a boat to meet the submarine. And there was a team of SBS lads on the submarine, and so there was 4 of them inside this chamber. It's quite horrendous, actually, the very first time you do it. You have all your equipment, and that includes weapons and stuff, and your dry bag, and your spare diving bottle, which is a Raber, which is a small thing that lasts about 10 minutes, plus your various pieces of equipment. And you leave the submarine and you squeeze through this hatch, and then you get into this chamber, which is a bit like it's a bit like 2 or 3 washing machines about the size. So you get to the end, and you're in the fetus position with your knees up against your chin. It's a very tight cylinder. There's only one little light in there, and there's a mask which you breathe off, air which you're breathing off the submarine. The next person gets in and sits opposite you. The third person gets in and sits beside you. The fourth person gets in and sits opposite the third person. And then the fifth person, in order to close the hatch, has to get in and lie on top of you, which is a really tight squeeze now, because you're all curved over. It's like a bean can shape. And then when they close the hatch, he can then go back and sit on the hatch. And so you're all crushed in, and then they flood the chamber, and the water comes in, and they say there's only this one little light. And that's the very first time I did it. I thought, what do I do if my air stops? And there is one spare breathing tube for all of you. And so then the water floods in, and most people have some level of claustrophobia. If you've got claustrophobia, this is not a place to be. But fortunately, we used to, back in the pool, in the swimming pool, we had a 16-foot deep swimming pool. We had this tube that we used to practice going into, and one person would go in with a scuba tank, and then he would call to the end, and then the next person would come in and next to you, and you'd share the scuba tank, so you'd buddy breathe off 2 of you, and then the third person would come in, and then the fourth person, and you buddy breathe off the 4 of you. Now, I don't know if you've ever buddy breathed 2 people, sometimes it's hair raising enough, but here you are in this tube, and if you run out of air, you've got to wait for the other 3 people to get out before you can get out, and they've got to be aware that you're in trouble. And so that's the training that we did. So that kind of gets you used to the mental anguish of being trapped inside a cylinder full of water. So back to the submarine. So there you are, filled with water, and you're in there for 20, 25, 30 minutes, and just hearing the bongs of the submarine. And you've got to go into a kind of a trance. Otherwise, if someone panics, you're screwed. You know, if someone went nuts, there's nothing you could do, because the submarine would have to surface and then open the hatches. The whole thing would take 4 or 5 minutes. And so, you know, if anyone lost their breathing tube, you'd die. So, so then you wait until the submarine has reached its location and its periscope depth, and then there'll be a bang on the side of the submarine, and then you'd open the outer hatch, and you'd all, one by one, get ready to climb out of the hatch. And what you do is you come off the submarine, then you come onto a very small bottle, which lasts about, as I say, about 10 minutes at 30 feet, 10 meters. And when you're out, you go along the casing, you follow a line if you can't see anything, and most times you can't see much. You follow a line to a cave, if you like, a dugout, what we call it, the bear trap, which is a kind of where they remove plates from the submarine so you can go down back into the surface of the submarine, but you're still in the water. And then you plug into a big bottle. And then you all join together and you all plugged into this big bottle. And then when it's ready to go, you go to the surface. Now, one of the problems in Scotland that we discovered was the sea locks. They're sea locks, they're seawater locks. But here's a phenomena that the SBS discovered. I'm sure the submariners knew it long before, and that is that when you get rainfall coming off the mountains, you get these large these streams coming down into the locks. You get masses of fresh water coming into the lock, and it can sort of it doesn't mix immediately with the seawater. It can be hundreds of yards long, like a huge bubble, which you can't see, and you can't see it on sonar. But when a submarine goes into this freshwater patch, freshwater is less dense than seawater. Things don't float as well in freshwater as they do in seawater. And they have this cute phrase for it. It's called an excursion, which to me sounds like a holiday, but it's anything far from a holiday if you're actually by this stage outside the submarine, because what happens, it's like going off a waterfall. The submarine literally goes off a waterfall into this freshwater patch and nosedives and plummets, and it can plummet hundreds of feet. On this occasion, there was this submarine was doing. The lads were practicing exit and re-entry. I was on a boat just up the lock coming towards the submarine with the new SBS lads. And the first thing we knew that there was a problem was there was a big rigid big Gemini black job attached to the periscope with a couple of SBS guys in it as safety. And the periscope, you couldn't see the submarine, obviously, just the periscope. And next thing, this huge rubber boat just upends, nose down, and goes down into the water because it's tied to the submarine. And then, of course, it's so big, this Gemini, that it's not going to go underwater. And so the line just ripped apart, and this Gemini came flying out of the water. Obviously, everyone's in the water. So clearly, the submarine had dropped. Unfortunately, the 4 SBS guys were in various stages of coming out of the chamber. And the submarine must have gone down about 200 or 300 feet. Now, the problem is, if you're on your breathing bottles, 2 of the lads were on their little, what they call Rabers, not plugged into the submarine. So I said it's about 10 minutes at 10 meters. Well, at 100 meters, just a few seconds. And they fell off the submarine. They died, drowned. One of the guys peeled off the submarine as it was plummeting, and he just got to the surface. He had no air left, and he only just got to the surface. So that was my introduction to the SBS, and we would average one diver every few years, lost in various things.
I guess it's the unanticipated, isn't it? That but then again, not always. I guess panic is something that really doesn't go well with diving, does it?
No. In fact, it's interesting that, again, going back to claustrophobia, I read a statistic that 1 in 7 people have claustrophobia but don't know it. And one of the reasons why the SBS selection has a lower pass rate than the SAS selection. It's a combined selection course now, but once you've finished the combined selection course, then the SBS members go off and do the diving section. So their selection process continues. And some of them actually don't know that they have claustrophobia. I remember when I was in the SBS in my early days, several Australian SAS guys. The British SBS was affiliated with the Australian SAS for some reason, I never quite understood that. We had an exchange draft with them, and they would often send lads over to play, and we'd go and play with them. And but Australia, they used to always them diving like the SEAL teams is mostly in bathwater. It's in beautiful viz. At this point, I'd been diving for probably a year now, and I'd never ever had a dive that I could see more than my extended hands. Once in a while, there was a bit of viz, maybe 5 or 6 or 10 feet, but generally no. You know, you had your compass board, and if you put it at arm's length, it started to disappear. And that was it. I thought that was SBS dive. I thought that was diving. That was it. You actually never saw anything. And these couple of these Aussie lads came over, young SAS lads, and been diving in wonderful sort of like clear viz, and came and dived with us. And 2 of them had claustrophobia and didn't know it. And they actually couldn't dive with us because they suffered too much from the claustrophobia.